The small town of Millbrook had always been the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was home to barely 300 souls who knew each other's business better than their own. The old wooden houses lined Main Street like weathered sentinels, their paint peeling and shutters hanging at tired angles. It was the sort of place where strangers were noticed immediately and remembered for years. So when Samuel Hawthorne arrived, on that foggy October morning in 1897, every eye in town followed his slow, deliberate walk down the cobblestone street. He was a man of perhaps 50 years, though. His face carried lines that spoke of experiences far beyond his age. His grey beard was long and carefully kept, and his clothes were strange, not quite foreign but not quite familiar either. The fabric seemed too fine for a traveling merchant, yet too practical for a gentleman. But it was his eyes that people remembered most, pale blue eyes that seemed to look through you as if seeing something just beyond the present moment. Samuel rented a small room above the bakery for Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, a widow who had been struggling to make ends meet since her husband's passing. He paid her 3 months in advance with coins that, while genuine, bore markings none of the local merchants could identify. When asked about his origins, Samuel would simply smile and say he had come from very far away. How far? Mrs. Whitman asked one evening as she served him tea in her modest parlor. Samuel gazed out the window at the darkening sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. Farther than you might imagine, dear lady, from a place where the constellations tell different stories. At first, the townspeople found Samuel merely eccentric. He kept to himself during the day, spending hours walking the forest paths that surrounded Millbrook. He carried with him a leather-bound journal in which he wrote constantly, using a strange, flowing script that resembled no alphabet anyone had ever seen. In the evenings, he would sit on the bakery's front steps, studying the night sky with an intensity that made passers-by uncomfortable. Dr. James Morrison, the town's only physician, was the first to engage Samuel in meaningful conversation. The old doctor had always been curious about the world beyond Millbrook's borders, and he found himself drawn to this mysterious stranger. "You write in that journal every day," Dr. Morrison observed one crisp morning. "Are you perhaps a scholar, a scientist?" Samuel looked up from his writing, a shadow of sadness crossing his weathered features. "I am trying to remember, Doctor. Each day, I write down what I can recall of home, before the memories fade entirely." "And where is home?" "A place that exists between the spaces, you know," Samuel replied. "A world that runs parallel to yours, separated by barriers as thin as morning mist, yet as vast as eternity." Dr. Morrison initially dismissed these words as the ramblings of a man perhaps touched by isolation or grief. But as the weeks passed, Samuel began sharing details that made the doctor reconsider. He spoke of technologies that shouldn't exist, of healing methods that seemed like magic, and of a society that had learned to live in harmony with forces that most people couldn't even perceive. The turning point came when young Timothy Fletcher, the blacksmith's son, fell gravely ill with a fever that Dr. Morrison couldn't break. The boy was dying, and everyone knew it. Samuel appeared at the doctor's door that night, his journal in hand. "There is something I can do," he said quietly, "but you must promise me that no matter what you see, you will not speak of it to others." Desperate to save the child, Dr. Morrison agreed. What he witnessed that night would haunt him for the rest of his life. Samuel knelt beside Timothy's bed and placed his hands gently on the boy's burning forehead. He began to speak in words that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the mind. The air in the room grew thick and electric, like the moments before a thunderstorm. A soft silver light seemed to emanate from Samuel's hands, growing brighter as his voice rose and fell in impossible harmonies. The fever broke within minutes. Timothy's breathing became calm and steady. His color returned, and he slept peacefully, for the first time in days. By morning, he was completely well, with no trace of the illness that had nearly claimed his life. Dr. Morrison kept his promise and told no one what he had seen. But Samuel's secret began to reveal itself in other ways. Plants seemed to grow more vibrantly where he walked. Animals approached him without fear, as if recognizing something kindred in his presence. And on clear nights, people began to notice that the stars appeared brighter when Samuel was watching them, as if responding to his attention. The truth emerged gradually, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. Samuel wasn't hiding his nature out of deception, but out of profound loneliness. He had fallen through a gap between worlds, arriving in a place that was almost like home, but not quite. The similarities only made the differences more painful. "In my world," he confided to Dr. Morrison one evening, "we learned long ago that consciousness and reality are more fluid than most beings believe. We could step between dimensions as easily as you might walk from one room to another. But sometimes, the pathway is close behind you. Can't you find your way back?" Samuel's smile was infinitely sad. "The door I came through has sealed. I feel it growing more distant each day, like a song fading on the wind. Soon, even my memories of home will seem like dreams." The townspeople gradually began to piece together Samuel's true nature, though they spoke of it only in whispers. He was not dangerous. If anything, he was the gentlest soul Millbrook had ever known. He helped wherever he could, always quietly, always asking for nothing in return. Crops flourished in fields he had walked through. Sick animals recovered after he spent time near them. Children who had been having nightmares began sleeping peacefully after he told them stories under the stars. But Samuel was fading. Dr. Morrison could see it in the way the strange light in his eyes grew dimmer. Each day, without the connection to his home dimension, Samuel was like a plant slowly dying in foreign soil as winter approached. Samuel made a decision that would become Millbrook's most treasured legend. He gathered the entire town in the old church and spoke to them with a clarity and warmth that touched every heart present. "I have been searching for a way home," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the sanctuary. "But I realize now that home is not always a place you return to. Sometimes, it's a place you help create." Samuel had decided to use the last of his dimensional energy not to seek a path back to his world, but to establish a permanent protective barrier around Millbrook. He would weave himself into the very fabric of the town's existence, becoming a guardian spirit that would watch over the community for generations to come. The ritual took place on the winter solstice, under a sky so clear that every star seemed close enough to touch. Samuel stood in the town square, his journal open in his hands, speaking words that made the air itself sing with possibility. One by one, every person in Millbrook felt a warmth spread through their hearts, a sense of connection, safety, and belonging that would last their entire lives. As dawn broke, Samuel's physical form began to fade like morning mist, but his presence remained, woven into every stone, every tree, every breath of wind that moved through the town. The people of Millbrook felt him in their moments of joy and sorrow, in their celebrations and their quiet contemplations. From that day forward, Millbrook became known as a place of inexplicable peace and prosperity. Travelers would often comment on the town's unusual serenity, the kindness of its people, and the way the very air seemed to whisper of ancient wisdom and gentle protection. Samuel Hawthorne had found his way home after all, not by returning to the world he had lost, but by becoming part of the world that had welcomed him. And in the evening hours, when the stars shine brightest over Millbrook, old-timers swear they can still see him walking the forest paths, watching over the community he chose to make his own. His journal was never found, though some say that on certain nights, when the boundary between worlds grows thin, you can hear the sound of writing echoing softly through the darkness. Samuel, still recording his memories, ensuring that the bridge between dimensions never completely fades away.